The Amazon rainforest is one of the most important ecosystems on Earth. Spanning across multiple countries in South America, it is home to millions of species of plants, animals, and microorganisms. It plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance of our planet's climate, water cycle, and biodiversity. But what if the entire Amazon rainforest were to burn down? What would happen to the environment, the atmosphere, and life on Earth? If a massive fire were to engulf the entire Amazon, the first and most immediate impact would be the sheer devastation of plant and animal life. The Amazon is home to over 3 million species of plants and animals, many of which exist nowhere else on Earth. A fire of this scale would wipe out entire ecosystems in a matter of days, causing irreversible loss of biodiversity. Thousands of species, from jaguars to rare insects, would either die in the flames or lose their habitats, leading to mass extinctions. The heat from a fire this size would also create an enormous plume of smoke and ash that would spread across South America and beyond. The skies would darken and the air would become thick with toxic fumes. This would pose a serious health hazard to people living in surrounding regions. The smoke could travel across continents, affecting air quality in other parts of the world. Respiratory illnesses would spike, and the reduced sunlight could even lower temperatures in certain areas temporarily, creating strange weather patterns. One of the most concerning effects would be the release of massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The Amazon acts as one of the largest carbon sinks on the planet, absorbing and storing carbon dioxide from the air. If the rainforest were to burn completely, all of that stored carbon would be released in one catastrophic event. This would accelerate climate change at an unprecedented rate. Scientists estimate that the Amazon holds over 100 billion metric tons of carbon. Releasing this all at once would lead to a sharp increase in global temperatures, speeding up ice melt, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events worldwide. Fires of this magnitude would also disrupt the water cycle. The Amazon generates its own rainfall through a process called transpiration, where trees release moisture into the air, which then forms clouds and returns as rain. Without trees, this cycle would break down. Rainfall in the region would plummet, leading to widespread droughts, not just in South America, but in distant parts of the world that depend on the Amazon's moisture. Agricultural regions that rely on consistent weather patterns could face crop failures, leading to food shortages and economic struggles. The destruction of the Amazon would not only affect South America, but the entire planet. Its loss would set off a chain reaction of environmental disasters, some of which we might not even fully understand yet. The full consequences would unfold over time, making it clear just how much we depend on this vital rainforest. But this is just the beginning of the disaster. In the next part, we'll explore what would happen in the days and weeks following the destruction of the Amazon, and how the loss of this massive rainforest would continue to reshape our world. In the days and weeks following the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, the environmental effects would become even more severe. The immediate fires may have died down, but the long-term consequences would continue to unfold, impacting ecosystems, weather patterns, and even human populations worldwide. One of the first noticeable changes would be the dramatic shift in global weather. With the Amazon gone, the atmospheric moisture that once helped regulate temperatures and rainfall across South America and beyond would disappear. Large parts of the continent would begin drying out, leading to desertification in areas that were once lush and thriving. Countries like Brazil, Peru, and Colombia would experience prolonged droughts, severely impacting agriculture and water availability. Rivers that once depended on the rainforest rainfall, including the Amazon River itself, would shrink, affecting millions of people who rely on them for drinking water, transportation, and food. And without the Amazon's ability to trap heat and regulate temperatures, extreme heat waves would become more common, not just in South America, but across the globe. Regions that were already prone to high temperatures would see record-breaking heat, while areas further from the equator could experience sudden and unpredictable climate shifts. The loss of tree cover would also cause massive soil erosion, as the roots of the rainforest trees had previously held the soil together. Without them, landslides and dust storms would become more frequent, further damaging local communities. Another critical consequence would be the rapid increase in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. While the initial fire released billions of tons of carbon, the absence of the rainforest would mean that this carbon could no longer be absorbed and stored. Global temperatures would begin rising more quickly than before, leading to an acceleration of climate change. Ice caps in Antarctica and the Arctic would start melting at an even faster rate. contributing to rising sea levels that could flood coastal cities worldwide. The disappearance of the Amazon would also disrupt ocean currents. The rainforest plays a crucial role in regulating air pressure and temperature, both of which influence oceanic weather patterns. Without it, shifts in wind and water temperatures could cause more frequent and intense hurricanes, typhoons, and monsoons. Places that typically experience mild storms could suddenly be hit by catastrophic weather events, leading to loss of life and destruction of infrastructure. The global food supply would also take a major hit. The Amazon's impact on weather patterns helps maintain stable agricultural conditions in multiple regions, including parts of North America, Africa, and Europe. Without it, farming conditions would become unpredictable, leading to crop failures, food shortages, and rising prices. Farmers would struggle to adapt to the rapid changes, and some regions could experience famine as a result. As the weeks go by, the damage would extend beyond nature, affecting human health and economies. With lower oxygen levels and higher pollution, respiratory illnesses would become more widespread. Hospitals would be overwhelmed with cases of asthma and lung infections, especially in cities that were already dealing with air pollution. The economic impact would be devastating as well, as industries reliant on the Amazon's resources, from agriculture to pharmaceuticals, would collapse, leading to job losses and financial instability. The destruction of the Amazon rainforest wouldn't just be an environmental disaster, it would be a humanitarian crisis. In Part 3, we'll explore what life on Earth would look like in the months following this catastrophe and how societies would struggle to adapt to an entirely new world. Months after the Amazon rainforest is completely burned down, the world would be in a state of environmental and societal crisis. By this point, the immediate fires and their thick smoke would have dissipated, but the long-term effects would be growing more severe. The planet would be struggling to adjust to the loss of one of its most important ecosystems, and the consequences would be impossible to ignore. One of the biggest changes would be in the atmosphere. Without the Amazon's ability to absorb carbon dioxide, global greenhouse gas levels would continue to rise at an alarming rate. This would lead to further warming, causing unpredictable and extreme weather events. Some regions would experience prolonged droughts, while others would be hit by record-breaking storms and flooding. The damage caused by these weather shifts would make it increasingly difficult for communities to recover, forcing many people to relocate as their homes and farmland become uninhabitable. Biodiversity loss would also reach a devastating scale. While the fires themselves would have wiped out countless species, the after effects would continue to impact wildlife. Many animals that managed to escape the destruction would struggle to survive in the altered environment. Without the dense vegetation of the rainforest, food sources would be scarce, and competition for resources would increase. Some species would migrate to new areas, but many would not be able to adapt quickly enough and would face extinction. This loss of biodiversity would have a cascading effect on ecosystems worldwide, as the Amazon's wildlife played a role in maintaining balance far beyond its borders. The loss of the Amazon's water cycle would also lead to significant changes in freshwater availability. Without the rainforest natural filtration system, rivers and lakes in South America would become more polluted and less reliable as sources of clean water. This would impact not only people in the region, but also global industries that rely on South America's water supply for agriculture and manufacturing. The lack of rain would further deplete reservoirs, making hydroelectric power generation more difficult. Countries that depend on the Amazon's water flow for energy would face electricity shortages, leading to economic instability and power outages. In cities worldwide, air quality would continue to worsen. While oxygen levels would not drop to dangerous levels, the combination of excess carbon dioxide and ongoing deforestation in other parts of the world would lead to increasingly poor air conditions. Major cities that already struggle with pollution, such as Sao Paulo, New Delhi, and Beijing, would see a rise in respiratory illnesses. Governments would be forced to implement emergency measures to control emissions, but without the Amazon's natural ability to regulate air quality, these efforts would be less effective. Another consequence of the Amazon's destruction would be its impact on indigenous communities. Many indigenous groups depend entirely on the rainforest for food, medicine, and shelter. With their land completely destroyed, they would be left without resources or a place to live. Some might attempt to integrate into urban areas, but many would face challenges due to the loss of their traditional way of life. Their knowledge of the rainforest plants and ecosystems, knowledge that has been passed down for generations, would also be lost, further erasing an important part of human history and culture. Meanwhile, the global economy would continue to suffer. Agriculture, tourism, and industries that relied on Amazonian plants and minerals would be forced to adjust to a world without them. Many products that people take for granted, such as coffee, chocolate, and medicinal plants, would become scarce or much more expensive. The pharmaceutical industry, which relies on compounds found in the Amazon, would struggle to find replacements for certain medicines, potentially delaying medical advancements and treatments. As the months pass, it would become clear that life on Earth has permanently changed. The Amazon rainforest had provided stability to global ecosystems for millions of years, and now its absence would be felt in every corner of the planet. In Part 4, we'll explore what the world might look like in the years that follow and whether humanity would be able to adapt to this new reality. Years after the Amazon rainforest has completely burned down, the world has been forced to adapt to a reality shaped by its loss. The environmental, social, and economic effects have only deepened, leaving behind a planet that is less stable, less predictable, and far more difficult to live in. By this point, global temperatures have risen significantly. Without the Amazon's ability to store carbon, greenhouse gas levels have continued to climb, intensifying the effects of climate change. Entire regions that were once habitable are now suffering from extreme conditions. The Arctic has seen record ice melt, causing sea levels to rise even faster. Coastal cities, including major economic hubs, have been forced to build costly infrastructure to hold back the ocean. Some areas have become completely uninhabitable, displacing millions of people. This has created a global refugee crisis, as populations are forced to migrate to places that are already struggling to support their own citizens. The weather has become even more erratic, storms are stronger, droughts are longer, and wildfires have become more frequent worldwide. The loss of the Amazon disrupted global rainfall patterns, and this effect has only worsened over time. Crops that once thrived in certain areas no longer grow, forcing farmers to find new land or abandon their trade altogether. Food shortages are becoming common, and the cost of basic necessities has skyrocketed. Countries that depended on consistent rainfall from the Amazon, particularly in South America, now suffer from repeated crop failures. In many parts of the world, fresh water is becoming more difficult to access. The Amazon played a crucial role in regulating the global water cycle, and its absence has left reservoirs and groundwater supplies shrinking. Some of the rivers that relied on its constant moisture have dried up, leaving communities without a reliable water source. Water disputes have become more frequent, leading to tensions between nations that are competing for what little remains. Some regions have resorted to expensive desalination efforts, but these solutions are not enough to meet the growing demand. Biodiversity loss has also reached a critical point. With the Amazon gone, thousands of species have gone extinct, while many others struggle to survive in a world without their native habitat. The loss of these animals and plants has caused unexpected ripple effects. Certain insect populations have exploded due to the lack of natural predators, leading to problems in agriculture and public health. Meanwhile, pollinators like bees and butterflies have declined, making food production even more difficult. The damage to the natural world is something that cannot be undone, and scientists warn that we are in the midst of an irreversible mass extinction event. Economically, the world has struggled to adjust. The industries that once relied on the Amazon's resources, such as pharmaceuticals and agriculture, have been forced to find alternative solutions. However, many of these replacements are costly and less effective. The sudden disappearance of key crops and medicinal plants has changed global markets, making everyday products much more expensive. Countries that once benefited from the Amazon's tourism industry have suffered major financial losses, as there is nothing left to attract visitors. The once thriving ecotourism sector has completely collapsed. Beyond the tangible effects, there is also a sense of loss that cannot be measured. The Amazon was a natural wonder, home to incredible biodiversity and cultures that had existed for thousands of years. Its disappearance has left a hole in the planet's identity, reminding humanity of what was lost due to short-term greed and negligence. While reforestation efforts have been attempted, the scale of destruction has made it nearly impossible to restore what was lost. The ecosystem that once existed in the Amazon took millions of years to develop, and even with the best efforts, it would take thousands of years to regain anything close to what was once there. As the years pass, scientists, environmentalists, and leaders look back at the loss of the Amazon as one of the greatest environmental disasters in history. The warnings were there. The consequences were clear, and yet humanity allowed it to happen. Now future generations are left to deal with the consequences of a world that is hotter, drier, and more unstable than ever before. The question that remains is whether humanity will learn from this disaster and take action to protect the remaining forests and ecosystems that still exist. If not, the loss of the Amazon may only be the beginning of a much larger catastrophe.